Marcelo into Hullet now. Surely one last chance. One last bite at the cherry here in Amsterdam. Ronaldo through to Hullet. Oh, what an ending here in Amsterdam.
If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. Danuso knocked out Ryan on the Xbox, and this time Boras knocked out Italy's finest in Principe.
What is going on, and welcome back to a brand new FUT Champions podcast. You could say podcast number 2 of FIFA 19. You have to say as well, straight from the off, a massive thank you for your support last week on our first podcast. Whether you come from Instagram, from Twitter, or over from YouTube as well. We really do appreciate your support, and we're very happy, as we said, to get this podcast back on the road. Of course, there's 3 of us that are involved in the podcast as always, and I always introduce him, Richard Buckley. Welcome back for another FUT Champions podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Brandon. You might hear that I sound a little bit nasally, you could say. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I think this is the back end of the cold. I had the sore throat, I had the cough, and now we're just dealing with the back end of the cold. But I'll tell you someone who's in tip-top condition. That's the man, Kojo FIFA.
Who knows for how much longer, though? My house is, like, seriously coming down with some kind of disease right now. I think Damie got really sick. Enzo's now getting sick. Ranners is getting sick. It's literally just Zima and I. We're the only healthy ones left. So, prayers that it can stay that way, especially for qualifiers coming up this weekend and for the next, 3 weekends, it seems like.
Well, I'm hoping I don't catch anything off Richard as well when I've had to work next to him on the desk. But more importantly, another podcast, as we said. If you're unfamiliar with who we are, it's at FUT Champions Podcast or at FUT Champions Pod over on Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. And basically today we have got some really cool stuff for you. We've got an interview with Rafsou. He has qualified for the licensed qualifier in December. He's qualified for the FUT Champions Cup later this month. We'll talk about the FUT Champions Cup, the announcements for that. And also we have an interview from Joksan, who won the Continental Cup. We spoke about him before, and he gave us a few minutes of his time to speak about that. But I think, lads, we've got to talk about the big news. And the big news is that the FUT Champions Cup of November, you could say FUT Champions Cup 1, going to be in Romania, in Bucharest. What do we make of that?
Yeah, if you're eagle-eyed on social media, I'm sure as a few people have, you've seen FIFA Commissioner Brent Koning tweet a little while back about visiting Romania, visiting Bucharest in particular. So if you're playing a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, you might be able to put 2 and 2 together. But official that the first major of the year will be in Romania. I'm not gonna lie, I've never been there before. I know it's a good location. You often hear stag do's going there in Bucharest. So who knows what to expect? Colin, have you had any experience with the Romanian capital?
I have not, unfortunately. I've heard good things. To be honest, I think it's just nice to have a bit of a different destination, because I feel like over the past 2-3 years, you've been kind of getting a lot of the same locations where, we've been to Spain like 3 times. There's
Spain,
been,
Germany, Paris.
three tournaments now in London. You've had tournaments in Manchester, so there's been 4 or 5 tournaments in the UK. It's been kind of the usual suspects, and it's kind of nice when you get those different events. Like, to be honest, last year, one of my favorite events was probably Amsterdam. Which was a little bit different from the normal locations, and that one was really, really good. So I'm expecting Bucharest to be a good time on and off the pitch, you could say.
And to link in with this as well, jokes aside, like Bucharest, Romania, it is known for its esports as well, for its more, you could say, traditional esports, whether it's a League of Legends, StarCraft, or maybe one of the other games that has been, played for many years compared to, us as maybe a newer esport. I think, the way we're going forward this year, as you said, we used to, normal cities as such as Munich and Barcelona, which, we are very grateful for, and I'm sure the players should be as well. First time for some guys that fly over from all over the world to these major cities. But Richard, you got to say as well, speaking of the esports history in Bucharest, it's nice for FIFA to be in there as well.
Yeah, I think it's a big move for FIFA. If you remember back in FIFA 17, It was, let me try to remember this off the top of my head, Paris, Madrid, Sydney, Vancouver, Berlin, and London, I believe. That were the locations during that run. FIFA 18 for the EA major events. We had Barcelona, Manchester, Amsterdam, London. This year we're starting off with Romania, we're starting off with Bucharest, so looks like we're changing it up a little bit, breathing a little bit of fresh air, which I think is good for FIFA 19. Only going to be 32 players on each console as well, as we spoke about last week, so probably slightly more time for games to be shown on stream for a different array of people. I know last year there were an often complaint coming up that it were only 8, 10, 12 FIFA players who came up now, like often on the stream, whose games were actually getting shown. With only 32 players on each side now, you've got to think every player should be at least getting a couple of minutes of game time here and there in a Swiss style format as well. You're going to get 0-2, 0-2s, players who you wouldn't have even seen last year coming up this year, which I think is another positive.
Oh, one more thing to add to that is that with the tournament being in Bucharest, it's being organized by PGL. Obviously, we've already seen ESL get involved in Paris, and the fact that we're getting kind of these bigger, more endemic, traditional esports tournament organizers coming in and putting these events together is very good. For example, I know the PGL guys they did the Krakow major, I think it was last year, for Counter-Strike, which was, or maybe it was 2 years ago, but it was a really, really good major that they put on there. They're putting on the Dota major in Bucharest as well. I think it's this year, might be next year, I can't remember. But yeah, PGL's had a very long history of positive experiences in esports, and everyone always has good experiences. So hopefully, from a spectator point of view and from a player point of view, we have a good experience with them.
Of course, as we know, you've got a few of your boys going to that event, obviously taking place over 3 days from the 30th of November to the 2nd of December. What was their reaction when that news came out?
I think they had a kind of a similar reaction to what I stated earlier, was just that we kind of wanted something a bit different, like a place we hadn't been. Because I think we get the opportunity to go to a lot of places. I think we're very fortunate to be able to go to a lot of places, qualify for a lot of these events, and even a lot of the third-party events from the past 2 years. Like we've been to South Africa, we've been to Bangkok, we've been to like these different places. So it's been pretty positive. But the fact that we now get a place that we haven't been before is pretty exciting, and the fact that it's the first big tournament of the year is exciting. So I think there's going to be a lot of hype around this event, especially to kind of see, now that we're getting to see the Xbox guys for the first time as well, to kind of see who is the kind of the players to beat this season on Xbox.
And you mentioned other games there, Colin. I want to take a little bit of a sidetrack. We're going to go down a Buckley tangent right now. With the eSports Awards coming up this Monday, do you feel as though FIFA gets the recognition as an esport it deserves among the other games? So in front of me, I've got the eSports Awards, the finalists here. And FIFA, I think if I've counted correctly, or EA in general, are up for, or like a mention of FIFA. I think there's 4 awards altogether. You've got Esports Breakout Game of the Year, which is legitimately just FIFA 18. You can vote for that on its own. Coverage website, nothing to do with FIFA there, really. You've got Esports Publisher of the Year. EA are up for that, but that's across all EA's different titles. You've got Broadcaster of the Year, myself and Brandon are up for that, and then Console Player of the Year, you've got Desari. Console Rookie, you've got Tex and Desari. Across like these 16 different awards, we've got 5 potential avenues to win an award. Do you feel as though, and your organisation, Fnatic, are up for Organisation of the Year, but that's not really that? Would you say that's that FIFA orientated?
No, guys. I mean, it's kind of like the Roma Fnatic brand. It's kind of the brand that operates within FIFA. But yeah, I think it all kind of links in. But are you just kind of asking about the relationship and kind of the perception?
The perception of FIFA among all these different esports as a family, you could say.
I think the fact that we're so early into it as well, and the fact that a lot of the times the biggest esports get kind of recognized by their big peaks on Twitch as well. So, for example, when Rocket League, is on, for example, when the RLCS is on, it's always kind of in that top 5 of Twitch because they usually get around, 60, 70, 80,000 viewers and maybe 100,000 overall on the event. So I think if we can start hitting those numbers, we'll start to get a bit more recognition, especially on Twitch, because I know our numbers are pretty good because FIFA's kind of structured a bit differently in the fact that we have a lot of different broadcast deals through FIFA and through the different leagues and things like this where we're on television a lot more and not as much on, the events are on Twitch, but the viewership isn't probably where we want it to be at the moment. So hopefully this season we'll see a bit of that change. But I think another big thing that's kind of put us a bit more in the spotlight is that a lot of our players are now becoming a bit more of like stars, and their personalities are kind of getting out there a bit more. Like people like Tex now pulling 5, 6, 7,000 viewers on Twitch, getting up to like 10K at some points on Twitch is really big, because that's where you're seeing kind of not necessarily Fortnite numbers, but kind of big numbers for FIFA, and especially big numbers for FIFA competitive players. So I think it shows that there is an appetite for these kind of really good players that have personalities as well through Tex and through these different guys and a lot of the Germans have done a really good job at this as well, is about building these communities. And so I think the more that we kind of get recognition around these individuals, the more the esport as a whole will kind of get a bit more respect from your, say, tier 1 esports. But I think we're definitely on the roadmap and on the right path to get to that, I guess, tier 1 status, you could say.
And just moving on from that point as well, recently I watched, it broke a lot of records, the Fortnite skirmish that happened a couple of weeks ago. 1.1 million, I think, concurrent on YouTube, which was more than the Premier League game taking place that day. The big thing with Fortnite is the content creators are really involved in these things. So you're looking at people like Dr. Loop or Courage. They're playing in these skirmishes, not at the most competitive level, but people like Nick Merckx, players like that, they're bringing a lot of viewers with them from that. Do you feel as though at these events, for example, in Romania, do you think we should have maybe another competition taking place where you're getting content creators pairing up with YouTubers, maybe a 2v2? We've seen that 2v2 can work from Gfinity. So, for example, you'd pair up Bateson and Gorilla, for example, and then they play in a 2v2, which could be for prize money as well, just to get more eyes on the product.
Yeah,
do you think we need things like that, or stick to the strict esports rule?
I think we're still early enough on that we can keep trying to grow it a bit organically instead of necessarily needing that injection from content creators. I think that the turn that you've kind of seen from a lot of pro players, where these pro players are now getting the YouTube views, are now getting the Twitch views, are now kind of coming up. It seems like the appetite for I guess you'd say competitive content is getting higher, and casual content is kind of stagnating or even possibly going down a bit. So I think that in the coming years, like, you'll get a lot more competitive interest organically. I don't necessarily think I think that there's definitely a role to play for these people. So, for example, you see a lot of the collaborations between, Matt, HD Gamer, and different pros, like opening
Zelonius.
their packs, and yeah, exactly, like Zelonius. I know Zimma's done a pack opening with him recently as well. So I think there's definitely a role for them to play, but I think it's not 100% necessary for us to be successful. I think that Fortnite is a very special case, and when you have influencers in Fortnite where these guys like pull 25 to 50 to 75K concurrents or whatever it might be just by themselves, especially on Twitch. I don't think, unless you have Castro on there, or Nick, or these types of people, those kind of top 2 or 3 guys, then I don't think it's going to have as much of an impact. Whereas, like, if you have these top players on here that are really, really good, but also, have these pretty much instant viewerships of, 5 digits plus on Twitch and on YouTube and on these different platforms, it won't be as much of a boost as you might think, because I think a lot more people are there for the actual competitive FIFA than they are for the influencers when they watch these types of streams. Whereas Fortnite, it's all built in, right? It's all the same thing pretty much. Like the influencers, the competitors, it's kind of all one scene. They all kind of qualify for the same events. They seem to compete in the same events. A lot of the Fortnite skirmishes as well are like invitationals, where certain pro players don't get invites, but certain influencers do. So there's definitely this kind of big give and take. And could you imagine, for example, if like Bateson got invited to an event, but it was an invite-only event, and Bateson got invited, but like TAS didn't. Like we would never hear the end of it, right? So I definitely think there's a balance there that needs to be struck. I think that at the moment it's probably about right is what we're doing.
It was an interesting listen for the side of that, and it's safe to say we've gone on a Buckley avenue. However, some really good points there. I think one about the awards. You just got to give it time. Look at the plans for this year for the whole global series. More tournaments. More league partners, including the EPL, and you can only think how far that is going to help grow competitive FIFA. And again, back to that influencer idea. I think that could work at some events. Maybe the day before the event kicks off, or maybe towards the end of it, there was like a fun tournament there that worked around the pro schedule. And some really good conversations there.
I think it works a bit better like with if you're trying to drive live viewership, like if you're trying to have an audience, I think then it makes a bit more sense, because then it's like, oh, come out and meet X influencer and Y influencer.
Come and meet.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're actually there at the events, because then you could almost make it where it's like a DreamHack vibe, or it's a PAX vibe, right? Where you've got all these other things going on, but FIFA's also there. So then naturally the people that already watch FIFA content are there to meet Bateson, are there to meet the Castro, are there to meet these different people. Then they immediately just are like, oh, the FIFA's on. Like, let's go watch the FIFA while we're here. Of course. Makes sense, right? But the fact that it's, these events are kind of more so, for the most part, have been kind of built for broadcast. That doesn't make as much sense to do this outside of Worlds. It doesn't really make sense to do that. So, it kind of depends on as well how EA wants to approach it. And I think we're going to see a lot of different types of events this year, because we have so many events coming up, right? So you've got the leagues, you've got the LQEs, you've got the FUT Champions Cups. I think especially with the different organizers and the different venues, like you're going to have a lot of different kind of setups for how this is going to work. So it'll be interesting to see how the pros and the content creators kind of coexist in this space.
So looking forward to that Champions Cup now, and a word to all our listeners as well. The EA website has actually just been updated, believe it or not, for the competitive side. It's actually looking really, really nice and sharp. All the points are broken down a lot more clearer, rules, etc. too. And as we know, the FUT Champions Cups are the big ones. 1.5k points you can pick up if you win that whole tournament. A word on, you could say, the rankings for this year. Are we looking forward to that?
Yeah, I think we're looking forward to seeing how people play over the course of a year. I think last year you saw players peaking really early in Barcelona or in Manchester, and then sort of plateauing, you could say, around playoff time. We've talked about it before. We don't have to talk about it again, how players will get into the playoffs. This is a much better structure. Last year, that is. This is a much better structure. This year, you're seeing the points total. It's very easy. So, me and you, Brandon, if we're doing a commentary, we can see, if #Ryan wins this game, he's going to get 230 points. That's then going to put him into the 57th position, which will put him up for a playoff spot. Whereas, if Jablet wins this game, he's then going to get that 230 points, and that's going to solidify his spot in the top 64 for the playoffs. So, it's very interesting. You're going to get more stories. I think it's a much more a much more genuine way of getting stories. Because people are actually playing for, you could say, like, their livelihood. Every game really does matter now. Whereas before, it was almost as though especially at the playoffs, the one game that really did matter was that round of 32 game to get you into that top 16. Now, if you go into a semi-final of a tournament and you rack up them points, you're pretty much laughing, because I think we've talked about it a little bit, Colin. If you're getting to a final of a couple of events, you're pretty much guaranteed to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like the person that wins, for example, the person that wins this first FUT Champions Cup, I find it very hard to believe that 59 other people are going to get more than 1,500 pro points throughout the entire season. Yeah. So I would say, like, if you win this, you're probably in playoffs already, just by winning this first event. 1,500 points is a lot of points, especially for only having 6 of these FUT Champions Cups. I don't think that you're going to get people 59 other people kind of getting on top of you there. So, yeah, it's going to be super interesting, and definitely a lot of math for you guys to do on the broadcast, which I'm sure you guys enjoy.
But just imagine if we get someone who was dominant last year, like Nicholas Razek, or someone like Desari. Desari played in 4 events last year. He got a 3rd place, 2 winnings, which was the grand final in Manchester, and then a top 8, I think, at the playoffs. If he comes in and starts just dominating these events, you're going to be racking up a pretty comfortable.
He can book a holiday. He can book a holiday by February.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you don't even have to play the rest of them. Like, that's the beauty of it. If Tex goes into Bucharest, wins it comfortably, goes into the December one, wins it comfortably, he don't have to play for the rest of the year. He can just play division rivals and scrim against the very best. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how it works this year.
And just to follow that up again, just to break it down for the viewers, as we know, the FUT Champions Cups are the big ones, and there are 6 of these tournaments from this month all the way through, obviously, to April next month, 6 months in total. The LQEs, which you will see, the licensed qualifiers, for example, the Continental Cup that went past, and there's one approaching in December that we will talk about very shortly. That's 850 points for winning one of them. And then going down to the league partners, such as the EPL, Virtual Bundesliga, Eredivisie, La Liga, Liga 1, EMLS, that's 850. And then I believe the other leagues, for example, the eSuperliga, the Austria Bundesliga, they're 200 points for winning them. And then there's other tournaments as well, PlayStation 4 country tournaments, which we haven't seen them yet. They're going to be coming as well. They're 200 points each. And the playoffs is when it gets serious, 1.8k for the winner. And then just to completely put it out there, if you're thinking you can somehow get to one of these events via FUT Champions, I can tell you now, it will take you a very, very long time. If you get 27 or more wins, you get 10 points. 10 points, Richard, towards
it's impossible.
towards getting to the playoffs.
And you got to pretty much guarantee that like every single pro is going to be getting 27 every single weekend anyways, just to maximize their points. So,
it's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to happen. But I think it will be like slightly important for those players that, say, for example, like a player decides to like take a vacation and can't play weekend league. That puts him 10 points behind the mark of every pro that is grinding every single weekend. And then who knows, the end of the season, you're 10 points short of, 60th place. And you're like, well, if I wouldn't have taken that vacation, maybe I would have qualified. So I think it's definitely going to, or if you get a 26, for example, that puts you 1 point behind everyone. And who knows if that 1 point might be the difference. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out.
And as we've spoke about all this point system and who's going to be doing well in the rankings as such, we might as well have a look towards the person that would be top of this leaderboard at the moment. It would be Joksan from America, who won the Continental Cup in a fantastic fashion. 850 points he would have won, and I actually caught up with him a few days ago. So I'm now very, very lucky to be joined by, of course, the Continental Cup winner in Paris a few weeks ago. It is Joksan from Epsilon. Joksan, thank you for coming onto the podcast, mate. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm doing amazing. I'm doing amazing right now. I'm still in shock that I won the whole tournament, but so far so good.
So, if people don't know this guy, he was the man that played in that tournament in Paris. It was the end of October. And of course, the event did take place. You won €20,000. You got tickets to the Champions League final. Of course, you're going to be top of that leaderboard now, where all the pros are trying to compete on this year as part of the Global Series. Talk to me about that event in general. I know you said you're really, you're still excited, you're still buzzing off it. Like, going into that event, was you always like, I'm going to win this event, or was it just one of those things where, as every game went past, you got a bit more confidence? Talk to me about that.
Well, the event, as soon as I saw my group, I knew it was going to be a tough event because I had the likes of Agger Rosemeyer, T-Mox, and Thomas Lees. And honestly, I don't think anybody was expecting me to go through as well. But yeah, like you said, as every game passed, I showed my dominance. And as every game passed, I started getting more confident. But of course, nobody thought, or even myself, that I would win this whole thing.
For sure. And one thing that I noticed, Richard noticed as well, when we were watching the stream, is against players like Aubameyang. Mo Aubameyang, who's a fantastic player, plays against this, the Stranger. These are attacking players you're playing against. The way you defended was really impressive in the tournament. Was that always just something you've always been good at since you started FIFA 19? The defending side of the game.
I think the 4-2-3-1 offers a lot of defending options. and ever since I started using that formation, like as my main formation, I've been getting better at defending. But I feel like it's a continuation from last year, because last year I used the 4-2-3-1 as well, so like I'm more familiar, and it's just like the experience with it. I feel that helped me defend like these side angles and like prevent crosses and time finesses from outside the box.
And obviously, as we know, you are that winner in that event now. You know, what a start to the year for you. I'm guessing one thing that was really, noticed is what you've done for the American FIFA scene. You know, you're currently the best player in the world, you have to say, for FIFA 19 at the moment, off major events. How proud did you feel, getting that win on the board for USA?
I feel amazing, honestly. Like I said, nobody was expecting me to win, and now bringing this home, it's just like I got a lot of messages from people from North America saying they're really proud of me, and honestly, like, this whole experience was just shocking, and it gives us a boost of confidence going into next events that we can actually do well and not just like go and visit Europe.
And to go and put on a show and go and win the event. And a massive thank you, Joksan, for coming on to the FUT Champions podcast. Of course, a FIFA player from Epsilon. And yeah, mate, all the best for the rest of the season, and thank you for giving up your time.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to Joksan there, playing for Epsilon, of course, and as we said, currently top of the rankings when they do come out, and before the first FUT Champions Cup. Boys, let's turn our attentions to the LQE then. As we know, there's another one of them in December, and as we know, 16 players from each console will be there, so 32 altogether. I don't know how you guys saw this one, but one name that flies out from me is the main man. He got himself to the Amsterdam playoffs, Richard. It's Gabinho. He beat Morna Garbo, his fellow countryman, in those qualifiers to get there. Gabinho's back. He's back competing.
I'll tell you what, if you know me, you know I'm a big Gabinho fan. For the main fact that we saw him in the V4 Future Gaming Festival. It was his first ever tournament, and he went and won the entire event. And then we saw him at the playoffs as well. He was a one leg away from winning. I think he won the first leg, then lost the second leg, but he's back, and you've got to say he's better than ever, to be honest. Quite a good performance from him. Some of the big standouts from that list that you're looking at, it's only 16 players on each console, so super difficult to get into. And there have been some names that are just qualifying for every single event. Tex is just being dominant on the UK side of thing. On the US side of thing, Alexander, Colin, let's talk about him because he's your player. What's been different this year? What's ticked for him, do you think, so far early on?
I don't know. I mean, I think that part of it is the competition isn't where it could be compared to Europe, for example. I think the only big threats he kind of has in the region are Fiddle, Joey, Goal Machine, and then maybe Remy Martin as well, kind of in there as well. He's really just kind of rolled through it so far. He's 15-0 at the moment in qualifiers, the only player in the world to not yet lose a game. I think his mentality has improved so much over the past 2 years, whereas now he kind of, I guess, probably sees himself more as a top player, whereas 2 years ago it was kind of the beginning of FIFA, and you just weren't sure of where everyone stood. But now I think that he's ready to kind of cement himself as one of those players to look out for, especially him qualifying for Worlds last year as well. So we're excited to see what we can do, especially when we get him up against the big Europeans. I mean, you've got some really tough competition, obviously. Gorilla Tex, Danny Rafsou, Dasari,
Megabit.
Tim Lotka, Megabit. Yeah, it's definitely not going to be an easy tournament, but we're excited and we're confident, and we're going to do everything we can to prepare appropriately. Obviously, having the HQ here in the house here in Europe is definitely going to help, being able to prepare them for the Europeans type of play style. So yeah, we're excited.
And also to add to that as well, it's so good to see the main man, New York City Chris, who was in Barcelona. Then after that didn't have the best of seasons. Yeah, he's back in there, and also Phil B is back. Phil B 94 from Toronto. There's some really good names in there from the Americas region, Colin.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting tournament. I mean, obviously you've got Fiddle coming out of NA as well as along with the two you just mentioned, but the PS4 side's got a decent list of players that I haven't really heard of either. I mean, you've got Kedar Dilo, who I think is a French player that I'm not really too familiar with. Balo Nico as well as a Polish player that Damien has told me a bit about, so it'll be interesting to see how he performs. And then Testo FIFA as well, I think is a German player, so... Yeah, and then you've got, of course, the Seoul hashtag representative, which is a bit interesting, because usually when you say Seoul hashtag representative, when it comes to that, it's usually a hashtag Ryan is kind of the guy you're expecting. But Honey Badger came through the APAC region. I don't think he's moved over to the UK quite yet, so he's still qualifying out of the Australia region. But yeah, making it in there, and will be representing hashtag.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to actually pick your brain on a little bit, Colin. You've had players before from different regions participating under Roma Fanatic banner. Do you think his qualifying ability will differ coming to London? Obviously, on that list there's not one English PS4 player. Quite interesting to point out. On the Xbox side of it, you've got Jablet, Tex, Gorilla. So you got 3 English players out of 32 in total. Do you think he's going to struggle qualifying for events?
Yeah, I think so, especially if they keep it the way it is. I think that he would be seeded into the West region, which makes it slightly easier for him because he stays away from the Germans and the Scandinavians, which would definitely help him. But I think it's not going to be easy because you've still got the French to contend with, and you've still got there are a couple of English players still that are pretty good. But I think a pretty good measuring stick was when you had the West Ham qualifiers recently, where it was only UK residents, and our boys on PS4, Damien Zimma, who obviously live here in London, made it to the final. So I think in the UK the quality is maybe not as high as it could be. But I think that because you've still got people like Shells, people like Venny, I think, as well played in that. You've still got Foot was Tom, Jazz. Yeah, so you still got 5 or 6 quality players, but I think comparatively, if you're looking at a region that has Germany and Sweden and Denmark, then you're definitely going to be coming into the, I guess, preferred region. But of course, they also get less spots, so it's kind of pick your poison when it comes to Europe.
And just a final comment on that. Speaking of Xbox, PS4. UK players. Are you surprised more players on the Xbox haven't transitioned across? We saw Harry do it for the Paris event, the first event of the year. Typically an Xbox player through and through, playing on PS4, qualified on that. Do you think are you surprised we've not seen more Xbox English players transition to PS4 to play?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that they came into the year not having all of the details about how qualifying worked. So a lot of them put thousands of pounds onto that preferred account, and most of them didn't, double up and put kind of equal amount of money on both consoles. So a lot of the guys have already spent thousands and thousands on these accounts, whether it be, on the Xbox, and so to then retransition over to PS4 would require significant investment to get your team to a level where you'd be able to compete with the PS4 guys. So I think it's definitely tough. I mean, unless they have a sponsor that they can kind of basically say, hey, this is what we need to do, then maybe they could try and do it. But otherwise, it's a pretty significant financial investment for them to try and get over there. But if they genuinely believe that that's the easier way or the easier path, then say go for it.
And it's good to see, obviously, some familiar names back in there, and Honey Badger still dominating. Obviously, congratulations to that man for the hashtag United move earlier on this year. One name that we haven't really mentioned at all is Rafsou. He qualified for the first FUT Champions Cup, and he's actually qualified for this licensed qualifier as well. Signed for Vitality moving into the FIFA 19 season, and I actually interviewed this man to catch up with him on what's going so well this season. So I'm now joined by, of course, Vitality's Rafsou, a French FIFA player and a FIFA player that is on fire at the moment. He has qualified for the November FUT Champions Cup that takes place in Bucharest, and then he's qualified for the December licensed qualifier. Again, we don't know where that is yet, but Rafsou, thank you very much for coming on the FUT Champions podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm good. I'm doing well.
And, in a few words, what a start to the year for you.
Yeah. I was expecting like maybe to qualify for at least 2 out of the 12 qualifiers in this year, because I was like thinking this is too hard, and for now I'm 2-on-2, so it's really really good for me.
So, of course, last year you moved from Olympic Lyon to Vitality.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that move, because obviously Vitality are a massive, massive esports organisation in France. Was it always, a bit of a dream of yours to go to Vitality at some point?
At the beginning, I was expecting to, play all my career in Lyon, at the beginning. But after, when you are an esport player, you have a career to move on. And when Vitality comes to you and tell you that you are the number one, we want you, you have to choose what's best for your career. And for me, the best is Vitality for now, because in France, this is the number one. Maybe in the esport universe in FIFA, this is maybe the number one between in top 3, I think, Vitality. So there is no word than yes to go there.
And obviously, last year your teammate was, I believe it was Coco V Bastos or something on the lines of, if I said his name right. This year, it's you're with Molzin, you're with Maestro, you're with Herosia, and then you got Vitality Brian as well, who's a bit of a player and a coach at the same time.
Yeah.
How good is it to have these players around you that are just making events as well? Is it like extra motivation?
Yeah, because this is like my first time I'm in a squad like this. I'm playing with like Maestro. He's one of the best in PS4. Erosia last year, fortunately, because of the thing he's gone when he was in Amsterdam. He wasn't in the
Finals.
the World Cup. Yeah, in the World Cup. So there are so good players in this roster, and this is motivating me. When you hear and you're hearing that you have to be the number one in the team, and there is some very good players like them, you have to motivate yourself. You say like, I have to qualify to every event I can. You have to be the best, because you don't want to be the third, the second, the fourth in the group.
And sometimes that competition is healthy to have in a team. Last question really is, obviously you've qualified for both these events already. Of course, we'll say it again, the November FUT Champions Cup that's in Bucharest. We've now heard, and that licensed qualifying event in December. What's different this year for you? Are you just enjoying the game more? Are you playing more hours? What's changed?
No, I'm in Vitality. I think I am the one who played less hours than the others. But I'm the player, I think, who can adapt to a lot of play style, like this year, you have to long shot a lot. There is the time finishing also. And all those things, I'm trying to use them to score, to defend as well. I want to try everything to, to improve my game style, my play style. So, this year I don't think I'm enjoying a lot more than FIFA 18 the game, but I'm trying more things, to score, to create opportunities to score. So maybe this is just the fact that I want to to progress in FIFA, and I'm trying like to sometimes to possess the ball to counter attack. So I don't know. When I play, I'm like, this is my opponent. I have to win, and that's it.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Rafsou. Good luck in Bucharest later on this month. And it's been Rafsou. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And all the best.
Thank you, bro.
Well, a massive thank you to Rafsou for coming onto the podcast. And you heard it from him there, Richard. It seems like playing with this new Vitality team, where he's got so many, of these top-tier FIFA Pro teammates around him, is kind of just spurring him on at the moment.
Yeah, one word that really sprung to my mind after hearing that interview was revitalised. He seems like he's back on his A game. We've seen him at the GFIT Elite Series now, pairing alongside Maestro, and I think it looks really good coming into this year, Brandon. But as we're coming down to the final stretch, we're coming into the home stretch of the podcast. There's been a bit of news this week, hasn't there? You put a tweet up basically saying this is what the eSuperliga is doing, great things over there. And it got a lot of interaction from a lot of pro players, a lot of people in the FIFA community, basically saying this shouldn't be on. Basically, I'll try and give you a little description of the video. It's two of the teams in the eSuperliga league, a licensed league this year in FIFA 19, and it's two guys sat opposite each other in booths, and then they've got the two teammates, both representing their team, sat behind them. And I think the first guy is FIFA Houston. He stands up and gives a big celebration just a couple of meters away from the opposite team. So what happens when the other team score? They do the exact same back, and then it's about a minute long, this clip.
And just to follow up on that, of course, I tweeted out saying I probably worded it wrong, and I'll say that I would say emotion, yes, but as a number of people told me, certainly not as passionate. But I think the thing that people are missing here, and I know we'll come on to this, and we'll talk about that this isn't the way to act as such. For these two teams, apparently they're a rival. Apparently they're rivals in the actual Superliga itself. So I don't know if that was something on it. And after the game, they were all fine with each other. We were all joking around about it. Of course, the neutral eye, which has seen, I think it's got over 200k views from this just normal tweet I put out, just showing off the new league. It just went insane. And as you said, the players on there, it was obviously Prime Turbo, FIFA Houston, and Nila Jacobson on one team. And it was Hassan Platt and Mohamed Al Bashir on the other. But Colin, what did you make of that situation?
I think it just comes down to you need to act professionally. I think that also it comes down to picking your moment. Like if you want to do that, especially against your rivals, like do it in the 90th minute. If you score a winner, don't do it every single goal and get in their faces, because it's FIFA and you're never safe. So it's almost like karma, where one team would score, celebrate really big, then the other team would score, celebrate really big, and it just kept going back and forth like that. And unfortunately, like to the observer, like it seems very petty and kind of childish of them to kind of act in this way, especially representing football clubs where you don't really see that in traditional football as well. And these are the brands that they're supposed to be representing. And if the football players aren't doing it on the pitch, I don't necessarily know if you should do it on our virtual pitch. So, I mean, that's what the celebrations in-game are for as well, right? So I think it was inappropriate, and I think that it's more so than just like what the players were doing to each other, but what it said about our scene and what it kind of showed everyone else. I think there's a difference between passion and kind of just being a bit childish.
Because the only thing I can compare it to, and again, this is a completely different other esport, is the way that the Call of Duty teams get in each other's faces a little bit at maybe not the big events, but like, for example, the tournaments maybe at Insomnia in England, or those lower key tournaments where it's just that passion in front of it. I wasn't too sure, as we know, that the full context of the situation, and as we said, they apologised on Twitter afterwards and said we're absolutely fine. It was just a weird one. I think, yes, definitely, you can't act like that, on TV as well. The viewers were fantastic for the league as well. I mentioned that. I think it had like a 76k concurrent it had, and it did really, really well over there.
The way that I view this is, one thing that you wanted, everyone's been asking for since FIFA Esports has been a thing, is we want rivalries, we want people playing against each other who really, it shows when you score something, because we see players like Dito score or Gorilla score, and then they just sit there, they don't give any emotion when they score. These two guys are legitimately getting up and celebrating big in front of each other. I didn't see that much of a problem with it myself. I see that it's two guys who, it's two teams who, clearly this means a lot to them, because you wouldn't celebrate it that way if it didn't. They're passionate about the game. They're showing that this means more to them than just a FIFA match. And at the end of the day, if next week or the next time that these two orgs play against each other, or football clubs play against each other in the league, if it's a home and away fixture, you said 76,000 viewers this time. If they promote this correctly, look, some of the biggest things in the world. Look at Khabib and Conor that just happened. That rivalry was built off of Conor McGregor throwing a dolly through the window of a minibus, and all the UFC did was just product placement advertise that, and it sold 2.5 million pay-per-views. If the eSuperliga want to run this and say, last time that happened, these two clubs, tensions, or it overspilled, you could say, if that gets more eyes on the product, I don't see it being that much of an issue. I think it was blown out of proportion slightly.
I mean, it's not the UFC though, right? I mean, I think one thing that's like a bit dangerous as well is the fact that they crossed the half into each other's halves. Because if you say you do that to the wrong person or the wrong team and like things really kick off, I think there's definitely a danger of that happening. But it was basically like one team would get all up in each other's faces and the other team would just like cower like they were scared, and then they would do the same thing to each other. So I don't know. I mean, it didn't kick off this time, but in the future, like it might, and that's the last thing I think the teams or the players want at the end of the day. Because say they did score a winner and they got in their face like that again, and one player just snaps and something bad happens, I think that's where it gets like a bit dangerous, and you have to worry about the player's safety as well, coming from a manager's point of view.
I think the big thing that was different from this, like, I don't see that much of a problem with it, but I also don't condone it. I think that's the big thing that I'm coming from. I think one thing that would have been different is if, for example, if FIFA Houston would have scored 90th minute, and that would have been the reaction, and they'd have got up and celebrated that big, it wouldn't have been that much of a problem. Whenever I see a reaction like this, I always go back to the Call of Duty Black Ops 3 World Championship Finals, and Cloud9, if you know what I'm talking about, you know. If you don't, it's going straight over your head. Cloud9 knocked out Optic Gaming, who biggest organisation in esports, and they knocked them out, and it were complete underdogs. And one of the players on the Cloud9 was called Aches. He's a massive Call of Duty personality, and he's pretty much like the bad guy of Call of Duty. They knocked him out. They shushed pretty much in the face of Optic, shushed the crowd because the crowd were booing, and went along with the day. Optic, they'd lost the game. All they could do was walk away. If that would have happened in that situation, and it had been one occasion, yeah,
or in a final as well,
yeah,
but like to do it like to go ahead by two in the league stage, yeah, doesn't make as much sense.
I'm in conflict. I think once you watch it a couple of times, I think the first time I watched it, I was laughing. Honestly, I was like, "What have I just seen?" Like when he ran across and shushed all three of them, I was like, "Wow, okay." And then you watch it back and you think, I see the point. I think it was Mike LaBelle said this could have been an altercation. This could have escalated into much, much more. But if I'm a casual and I don't know anything about these players, I probably watch that and think, wow, this is great entertainment. Both these players getting up and like popping off in front of each other. Wow, this is interesting. So I don't know.
I think there's also like a way to entertain as a pro player and not like get so confrontational with it. Like if you look at Habidi, for example, right, the No Fuchs Given player, he is immeasurably entertaining with his celebrations and never gets even close to his opponents. So I think there's still a way to like be entertaining and not necessarily like have to disrespect your opponents to their faces to do it. Because at the end of the day, like and unfortunately these guys are friends, but you know, you've seen other situations where players haven't been friends and it hasn't ended well. So, you know, it's just things you kind of have to try and like set a precedent for and kind of conduct yourself in a consistent manner across all of your games. I think as well that, you know, the key point to take from that is, you know, we don't condone it, and it has to be done if you are going to celebrate and enjoy yourself, more like Khadibi, as you mentioned, who does these crazy celebrations which are quite entertaining as well, but in the right way. And you know, you shouldn't be crossing the line to your opponent's half, getting in each other's faces, which could go out of hand, and it just makes you know, your opponent not feel comfortable at all. But you know, as we said, it was lucky that they were friends and this issue was sorted, but hopefully we won't be seeing something like that again. But on the side note of that, the eSuperliga has run really well on its first week, Mondays and Tuesdays. I think you can watch it as well, pretty much from anywhere in the world. Of course, not in English, in Danish. And yeah, Mondays and Tuesdays it is on the eSuperliga. Fantastic views it's been hitting in. Big names in there as well, like Marcuso, who just moved recently to the north. Agi Rosemeyer, Lasse,
Mohamed Al-Bashi, you know, the list goes on of all these players. And of course, do let us know down below in the comments whether you're watching on YouTube or drop us a tweet on your thoughts on that one.
And one final thing on the eSuperliga situation, I've watched it back a couple of times, and there don't seem to be any referees there separating the two players, which probably is something that they need to look towards in the future. I think if you look at all the EA events that have taken place when they're on the main stage there, there's always a couple of referees in between both players, so that sort of thing can't potentially happen. The other big news coming out of this week was the fact that FaZe TAS has actually been suspended from further competing. It didn't say how long the suspension was going to last. He made a derogatory, I should say, term on one of his YouTube videos where he was doing his player picks, and the players just didn't fall for him in the correct situation. He said a particular word. He didn't think the connotations of the word were what they were in the connotation that it came across as. EA came across and actually suspended him from competing. Obviously didn't say how long. This is two players now that have suffered the same consequences, being him and Kurt. I want to come at it from a slightly different perspective, Colin. Your guys at Roma Fanatic, they're making content, they're streaming. How much do you monitor what's going out from their social media, from their YouTube, from their Twitch? Or do you just, fingers crossed, hope that they don't say anything that could hurt them in the future?
Fortunately, I think I've put together a team where I don't have to worry about that. But I think that there are like certain players or certain, you know, that kind of have that potential to go over the edge in certain situations. I mean, anybody can do it, right? Like PewDiePie has had one of these moments. Nick had one of these moments. I think it just happens sometimes, and I think the tweet that TAS made addressing the situation was pretty good, actually. And I think that even Kurt in his most recent video said he was disgusted by the tweet, and the fact that he was, you know, apologizing was ridiculous and all these other things. But I think it was actually a pretty well put together tweet, and I think it, you know, shows that he has at least learned his lesson. And I think that that's the most important thing, is that you just understand what you've done wrong. And maybe he did know the connotation, maybe he did, but I find it hard to believe he didn't. But the fact that he then kind of made amends for it and is now just kind of moving forward and is kind of just accepting the ban and moving forward, I think is good. And hopefully the suspension isn't too long, as I think that he has learned, and his apology was it seemed sincere, apologizing and saying he just needs to be better and more professional, which I think is true all across the board for the entire scene. And I think the thing that we can't do when it comes to these situations is do what I like to call whataboutisms, which is like, oh, well, what about this guy? Or what about this pro that said this? Or what about this pro that said that? I think that the fact that it has been kind of bigger players has kind of set the tone going forward of you just have to be more professional in general, and that no one is kind of safe from repercussions, and that it doesn't matter who it is. And I'm sure that more bans will come down in the future on multiple pros, that if you're at the top of this esport, you have to be professional, and you can't excuse even slip-ups like this. So for example, if one of my players did what TAS did, we would have treated it in the same way. We would have accepted the ban. We probably would have had some kind of internal punishment as well, and would have tried to move forward from that moving forward. And I think that's all we can do, is just move forward and try and do better.
And you know, just leading on for that on one final point before we end the podcast is, you know, it's lucky, as we always say, that we've got this knowledge of Colin, who is a team manager, and you know, he knows what he looks for in a player, you know, what you can't be doing, and not just speaking about TAS's situation, which, as I said, I think he came forward and apologised well for it and stuff, and acted in the right way. But you know, people like in situations like that could easily lose their contracts. They could, you know, be in a completely different situation. You know, imagine getting a ban and losing your contract from a team. You could be missing out on a salary there. And obviously, if you are banned from competing, you can't be involved in any prize tournaments, any prize money as well for tournaments. And I think, you know, another podcast, boys, we've been able to cover a number of different avenues, from the Bucharest announcement to an interview with Joksan to an interview with Rafsou, talked about the eSuperliga, you know, how FIFA esports is perceived and compared to other esports. And then, of course, there at the end about players, acting the right way. And safe to say, Richard, another hearty podcast.
Yeah, good lot of content there for the podcast. We've come back with a bang on this just after bonfire night. Is it your first?
Yeah, I was so confused. And everyone kind of informed me, no, just fireworks night. Basically, the 4th of July of the UK is what I've learned. So, yeah, seemed like a good time.
Well, a massive thank you to Colin Johnson, aka Kojo FIFA, and we wish him all the best in Gfinity this week, which me and Richard will be commentating at as well. And a big thank you, of course, to Richard Buckley, who's always on the podcast with us. And to all you guys as well that have listened on YouTube or whether you've listened to or you've come from Twitter or Instagram, it's at FUT Champions Podcast on all our social medias. #FUT Champs Pod if you want to get involved in the discussion. And yeah, we'll catch you same place, same time next week. And enjoy your weekend. Enjoy playing Weekend League. Good luck in your qualifications if there's any pros listening or upcoming pros. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.